We are under starters orders for another edition of Beyond the Touchline. Adrian Healy with Nick Cowell alongside. Nick, are you ready? You ready for some Africa today?
I am ready for some Africa, yes.
I don't mean the song Africa by Toto, which we should have playing as we do this episode, but Africa are just going to be a massive part of this summer's World Cup, and as they have been increasingly, and they're going to be some amazing stories to follow, Nick, I'm sure.
Absolutely, and we're excited to have our guest today who was actually born in Sierra Leone in Africa and keeps up to date with all of the goings-on in African football. And so maybe you would like to introduce our guest, Adrian, real quickly.
Someone we both know very well indeed, Mr. Michael Lahoud. As you said, born in Sierra Leone, represented his country on many occasions, had a great pro career here in the US after having a college career. And I kind of gave him his debut as a broadcaster, Nick. He hung up his boots and jumped straight into the booth and joined me for the first few seasons of Austin FC broadcasts, used that as a launchpad, and now works for CBS Sports and Paramount Plus. And even though European leagues are his primary duty, I know he keeps very close tabs on everything that's happening in Africa and always tries to include some African stories in whatever content he's producing. So he's going to have some good words for us, Nick.
Absolutely. And he talks a lot about his first Adrian Healy cap that he hangs up on his wall, as do I, my first podcast, Adrian Healy cap too.
Well, yeah, we may towards the end of talking to him get some memories of covering the Verde in black. But we got a favour to ask, Nick, haven't we, before we get to Michael? What would that be?
Yes, if you're enjoying Beyond the Touchline, please take a second to follow or subscribe wherever you listen, whatever platform you're listening to. It helps more people find the show and also allows us to keep bringing you conversations like this one. And if something we say resonates with you, please jump into the comments. We read them all, and they often shape future episodes.
All right, lovely stuff. So let's get right to it. Coming up, Mr. Michael Lahoud talking Africa in World Cup 2026. Welcome back to Beyond the Touchline. Adrian and Nick, delighted to be joined by the one and the only, the man I call Mr. L. Mr. L, Michael Lahoud. How are you, Michael?
Mr. H. It's good to be back, and I think it's been too long since we've been in front of a camera like this, and I always thought that the man to the other side of you would have done well in the booth. I think the third missing member of our Austin FC, broadcast booth trio that never was.
Yeah, the sideline reporter we needed, but
I could have been the red hat.
So we obviously had to have you on, Michael, for this edition of Beyond the Touchline, where Africa is our focus, and the continent is going to be such a big part of this summer's World Cup that just wanted to get your kind of perspective and expertise as someone who was born there and someone who represented a country on the continent. So I guess as a way into the conversation, just tell us a little bit about what you think makes African football maybe different and what makes it so special.
Yeah, I mean, African football, it's its own thing. I feel like African football should have its own World Cup. I feel like the World Cup qualifiers or AFCON could really be its own World Cup in its sense, just because I've always learned this from playing in Africa, and I think it really took me going back and playing and representing the national team. There's an acronym TIA, This is Africa, which literally means whatever craziness can happen will happen for 90 minutes plus or 180 minutes, no matter what length of time you're watching a football match. It's culture, it's passion, it's chaos for me when I think of African football. And some people, especially I think in Europe, you're used to the structure of the game. I think Europeans, you created the game of football. But for me in Africa, we live the game and breathe the game in such a unique way, where football is literally life for just about every single person on the continent. And just seeing a group of people who have nothing or close to nothing, when it comes to football, they'll stop everything they're doing and just tune in. And it's the world is that group of people's oyster for those 90 minutes. And so I'm really excited to be able to do this. and talk about the continent I love so much and talk about the brand of football I love so much. There's literally nothing like African football. It's its own genre.
Think, I always come at these interviews, Michael, from the point of view of a coach. And I'm always interested to see what's it like in the locker room of a team that's playing in Africa. How does that change compared to, obviously you had a great career at Wake Forest. So I'm sure it was a lot different to that atmosphere there. What did World Cup qualifying football for Sierra Leone teach you about African football's mentality that we just can't get it, even though we watch it on TV? Like, what did that bring to you?
I think playing in Africa, and I think it's a really good question. So here in the West, and I think especially here in the States, it's all about order. It's organization. You have the cones out there. It's about being queued up on the drills. It's about being in your position, and it's about the system of play. There, it's about the vibes. I remember the first time I went away to a match, and I remember we get off the bus, and I want to say it was maybe Lesotho that we went to. And I just remember we get to the stadium, no one leaves the bus, and everyone's there. And you would have thought that, okay, it's about 90 minutes till kick. What are we doing? And someone that we all know very well, Mr. Kai Kamara, he literally is like, all right, no one leaves until we have our music. And so I'm looking around, there's no boombox or anything. And one of our backup goalkeepers pulls out a small drum, and it's almost like a djembe. And he just starts rattling off some music, and we're singing, we're dancing, and Kai is finally like, we're ready to go play and win this game. And my mind is literally blown because it wasn't the drills that set us up for success. I'd like to say it was the coaching at the time. It wasn't the coaching. It was just the vibes and the camaraderie, you know. And I think that is part of the heart and soul of what makes Africa different. When you watch things like AFCON, when you watch some of the coverage now that we're fortunate to have, internationally, one of the things that speaks to me most is just the camaraderie amongst the players, the music. They're really channeling their culture. And I think with Sierra Leone, that was something that always caught my attention. It was just as important for us to represent our culture, our food, our people off the pitch with our music, and how, we just honored our culture as it was to get the result on the pitch. And I don't think you're going to find that anywhere else.
Yeah. I would have loved to seen Jay Vidovic's response to you when you suggested that before an NCAA tournament game.
Yeah, I think I tried to suggest one song on a playlist and was banned from ever choosing music on the playlist again. Videos, a lot of things, that would have not flown with them.
Yeah. I knew you'd get Special K in somewhere along this talk, Michael. It only took 3 minutes. Special K, by the way, Kai Kamara, a fellow Sierra Leone international, fellow MLS player. I wonder, Michael, now you've made the transition into the broadcasting world, and you are still you're covering obviously mainly European soccer, but I know you look to shine a light on African soccer whenever you can. What are kind of some of the stories that kind of have popped up on your radar in recent times that may have some kind of bearing on what we're watching this summer?
Yeah, I mean, the big one, the elephant in the room, has to be the African Cup of Nations final. What happened in Morocco, that is a once in a lifetime thing, for better or for worse. And I think we're still seeing the chaos of it unfold. For the record, you will never convince me that Morocco are the African Cup of Nations champions, right? Unless, hopefully someone doesn't see this on the internet and decide to sue me for what I said in Casablanca. But for me, it was less about the chaos off the pitch and more about the story on the pitch. And just Sadio Mane, for me, will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, African footballer of all time when it's all said and done. And I think we got to see the influence of what an African player, being in a European system for most of his career and being a leader of his country, being a figurehead of his country, showing growth in the African game that I don't think we've seen ever, right? We've seen so often, we've seen the Samuel Eto'os, the Didier Drogbas, the Michael Essiens, big names, lose their composure. And he would have had every right to lose his composure. But for me, I'll never forget the moment that Sadio Mane goes back and grabs his teammates to come out and finish what they started. And it yielded the best result you can imagine, which is Senegal saving a penalty and going on to score the winning goal. I think another thing that really has caught my eye in African football is the landscape of African football is changing. I mean, you look at the teams that are going to be here at the World Cup. I think that's probably the thing that I implore people to watch African football is, yes, you have your big names and a lot of the big countries are usually there. But I mean, you look at the teams that aren't there and the teams that will be there, it is always just a roll of the dice every qualification, whether it be for AFCON or for the World Cup qualifiers, as to who's going to make it. And there's this sense of accountability of if you don't have the right infrastructure, if you don't have the right coaching, if you don't have the right leadership, you will fail and you will not make the World Cup.
Yeah. I was at the Morocco African Cup of Nations in the earlier rounds. I went for a week earlier, and it was the second African Cup of Nations I've been to as a spectator, simply not even working. And I love it. I love the tournament because as you use the word chaos, and that's accurate, but it's kind of more than that, isn't it? It's like the feeling that absolutely anything can happen.
Yeah.
And I remember watching that final back in London, and actually it was jaw dropping what did happen. But in some ways, it made perfect sense because it just kind of went with everything that had preceded it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I mean, for the games that I covered, there's times now that I go back and you know this, Adrian, when you're doing your lineup sheet and yes, I still do the lineup sheet.
Yes,
Stepped away from the
go.
sticky notes and the sticky tabs, but I have my own. I finally found my own way of doing it. But when you go
sticky
through
notes,
yeah, yeah, that
for those watching this,
when you go through the lineup sheet and you go through someone's bio, the amount of times that whether it be in the French football, Italian football, the players that are represented throughout the world that are part of the African football diaspora, it's amazing. And so
yeah,
the amount of times I'll go through and I'll look at a player and think, oh my gosh, he played for Mali. Oh my gosh, Mali shouldn't have been in the quarterfinals, and yet they were there. Oh wow,
yeah.
I remember that guy, and I remember something he did, and so it's really cool. I think for the first time ever, for me personally, to have a connection for European football and club football pointing back to African football and not the other way around. You know, I think we're starting to see kind of a change in that African football is starting to get some appreciation and some eyeballs.
So let's pivot towards the World Cup, and we'll start with a little history, Nick. When I ask you, African football at the World Cup, what your first and abiding memory is that comes off I bet it's going to be the same one that I have, which is Cameroon in 1990 against England and how close they were to knocking England out.
Well, my first thing would have been Zaire when they beat Scotland.
Oh yeah,
wow,
yeah.
Okay,
Zaire in '74. But here's the deal. I went back. I mean, I think you can make the argument that over the course of World Cup history, continent has had a bigger change in the contributions they make towards the World Cup. Because for the first 4 decades, there was hardly any African presence at a World Cup. They didn't get a guaranteed place at a World Cup until 1970.
Wow,
which I'd forgotten about.
Wow.
Back in the 60s, Michael, they made them play off. There was a winner of an African qualifying tournament. They made them play off against a European team.
Are you serious?
One place. Yes. And Morocco lost the playoff to Spain in the 60s to qualify for 66, I think.
Jeez.
And then during the 70s, like Nick was mentioning, Zaire was part of that era where they got one spot. Tunisia were actually the first African team to win a World Cup game in 78. They beat Mexico, and then it kind of changed in the 80s. The 80s, it went up to 2 teams in Spain. Remember that, Nick? Cameroon and Algeria. Well, here's actually one of the first main memories of Africa was how Algeria were kind of cheated out of a place in the knockout rounds in '82. Remember that collusion? Germany and Austria.
Oh, that was '82. Oh, I didn't know that was Algeria.
Yeah.
Wow.
Algeria. Yeah, they'd won 2 group games, but they, back in those days, played the 3rd group game not at the same time. So Algeria played first. And then Germany and Austria knew a 1-0 win for Germany would put both of them through instead of Algeria a day later. And that's exactly, they just kind of walked around the field. Remember that, Nick?
I do, absolutely. Yes, it was like watching, I'm not going to say what it was like watching.
Watching Swindon on a good day.
Yeah.
It was like watching a Monty Python skit.
But yeah, that actually forced FIFA to change
Mm.
World Cups moving forward and made the third game simultaneous. But yeah, then Morocco, and it kind of different areas of Africa, Michael, have kind of come to prominence at different times. In the 90s, it was really the emergence of West Africa, Nigeria coming to the fore for the first time. And yeah, those Nigeria teams were great, weren't they, in the 90s? Came very close to knocking Italy out in the last World Cup in the US.
Yeah, no, so when you asked that question of, where were you and what was your first interaction with African football, it was really strange for me because in Sierra Leone, I grew up listening to matches by the radio. You get BBC World
Yeah,
Service, and remember being huddled around, and it's part of my childhood memories from Africa. And you could hear the football matches being described, and we could hear what was happening in the Premier League era. I had a coworker ask me, "What was your first exposure to Premier League football?" I was like, "Well, when the Premier League started, because I was a kid and you just heard it by the radio." And so I knew of some of the players, but it was the first time seeing the players. So
yeah,
of course, I heard Yashidi Yekini, but I didn't know
yeah,
what he looked like. So it
yeah,
was really confusing and exciting and all these things seeing that Nigeria team in 94. And, I just moved to the States in 93. So it was part of my literal coming to America process and experience. And it was really powerful that soccer, football could be the tool that I connected with the World Cup. But that Nigeria team, man, was awesome. I would say the only thing that was better than that Nigeria team was the Nigeria team of 98 for me,
yeah,
just because those were some of the players that, I mean, what a team they had. And I think the way they played with passion, the way they were unapologetic about being Nigerian, it really spoke to me and really tapped into something internal for me about, okay, it's okay to be different. It's okay to be kind of have pride for being African. It's unfortunate they couldn't fulfill their potentials in the way they did, but I would say that the biggest team that had an impact on me was probably the Olympic team in 96 in Atlanta.
yeah,
That
yeah,
team of 98, so many of that golden generation, that young generation. I mean, that team, that team arguably is the greatest African football team ever. And, they should have won even more than they did. I'd say from 94, 98, that probably had the most impact on me in terms of
yeah.
falling in love with African football.
Yeah, I actually saw them play in Dallas a
Mm.
couple of times in '94.
Oh, wow.
And some of those players actually ended up going, obviously, to the UK to play, JJ Okocha and Finity George.
Yeah. Oof.
And
What a
who was the
player.
guy who scored? Is it Amakachi?
Daniel
What was his name?
Daniel
Omakachi, yeah,
Amakachi, yeah.
Daniel.
Amakachi, yeah.
Yeah, he had the
Yeah.
celebration
And
with the Nets.
yeah. And I was happening just to sit right with all the Nigerian supporters at one of those games and just to be immersed in that culture of they didn't stop the whole game,
Yeah.
the drums, it was just amazing.
And one of the interesting things to me, Michael, and maybe you can shed some light on it, is the emerging sort of newer nations that
Mm.
come to the fore in World Cup. We're talking about West Africa, and then we get into the 2000s, and suddenly it's Senegal, and it's
Yeah.
Ivory Coast, and it's Ghana. I mean, those were kind of three nations that hadn't really had much of a history up to that point, and yet they suddenly took over the mantle, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think they have to thank Ligue 1 for that, because Ligue
Yeah,
1 has been a pathway for African football, I think, to take that next step and bridge the gap where before, unless you're an absolute world beater, right, you weren't going to make that big jump from African football straight to the Premier League. It was almost impossible, or be on a team that could potentially go and win the Champions League. All those players that you talked about, I think of Hadj Diouf from that 2002 team. You think of, Pap Thiaw, who is the
yeah,
manager of Senegal, who, was on that 2002 team. Michael Essien played French football with someone we all know very well, Greg Vanney at Bastia, as well
yeah,
as his rise moving forward. And, I mean, you go through the list of how French football has been such a welcoming place for Africans, I think, to ply their trade, to realize their dream and take that next step, I think, to be at the highest level. That was really eye-opening for me. And so I'd say that 2002 World Cup, that is still, till this very day, my favorite World Cup.
yeah,
And I always thought I would say somewhere down the line I'll change it to the 2010 World Cup in South Africa. But watching that Senegalese team play, and I think it's Baba Diop that scored the goal against France and did the celebration, took the shirt off. It just reminded me so much of what I loved about Nigeria. They just were unapologetic. They had fun, and they really came to prove a point and make a point. And when you shock the reigning European champions and world champions, I think that immediately got everyone's attention. But I think it goes back to how it doesn't matter who the team is. The fact that you have different African countries flying the flag for Africa at any given World Cup, for me, it kind of goes back to what's the mission statement of African football right now. It's who can be the next country to push the boundaries of what African football could be. And you think of the Cameroon was really that team for me in my life that was the first one to plant the flag in the ground in Italy. Then Nigeria moved the flag a little bit more. Senegal took the flag and said, okay, we'll run with it a bit more. And now you're seeing from, say, 2010, Ghana and on, the focal point of football in Africa seems to be North Africa. You know, you think of what the North African countries have done and how far they've come. So it's really cool to watch.
Yeah. Go on, Nick.
No, I was going to say, I played in France for a year in the south of France, and I would say 2/3 of our team were from those Francophone North African countries, Tunisians, Moroccans, Algerians, and they brought such a different vibe to the team. I mean, I think that their vibe is different, obviously, than the West Africans and the Nigerians, but they're very technical, they're very comfortable on any type of pitch. I mean, you could play on concrete and they wouldn't care. That's kind of the way that they grew up.
Yeah, I love that. And and just very quickly for me, I remember going to Anfield to see Riyad Mahrez the year Leicester won the Premier League. Well, he's best player by a country mile. I thought I went to see Christian Benteke and all these other players, and I just was glued between him and N'Golo Kante. But just what you said about technical ability, and you see it with the videos now, ball flying out of the air, immaculate first touch every time. It's insane.
Well, you mentioned the planting of flags, and I think all those countries you mentioned, there's a common theme. Cameroon in 1990, Senegal in 2002, and definitely Ghana in 2010. Their World Cup runs came to an excruciating, heartbreaking end. In every case, Cameroon were only 7 minutes away from knocking out England and placing the semi-final. Senegal took Turkey to extra time before losing. Then Ghana, oh my goodness, Michael, in South Africa. I still think about that. Yeah. I remember watching that game in Cape Town going, how did they not win?
Yeah, look, penalty kicks are the bane of African football's existence, right? Just put one penalty kick away and you can make history. I remember that Ghana-Uruguay match. It felt like an AFCON match, literally.
Yes.
It felt like an AFCON match, from Suarez to everything, missed penalties. I felt so connected to that match of all World Cup matches. I'd say that's probably the most connected I felt to a football match that wasn't an African Cup of Nations match in a long time, maybe even ever, right? And so to see how agonizingly close so many countries have come, and then to see the last country I probably ever thought would be the country to go and move that flag to the next horizon in Morocco. I want to see and I want to meet the person who, if you're a betting man, put wagers on Morocco to reach the semifinal of the World Cup. Because they're the richest person in the world, in my opinion. Like, the odds must have been astronomical. I don't know if you guys saw that coming. I certainly did not. And the way they did it, the way they grew in confidence was ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, they beat Spain and they beat Portugal in the knockout rounds. I mean, that's two massive scalps, and only went down to France eventually in the semi-final. In fact, 2022 all around, Michael, was maybe Africa's best World Cup yet, because 2 teams made it to the knockout round. All 5 African teams won at least one game in their group. That hadn't happened before. So yeah, it's another landmark, which kind of leads us to 2026 and what to expect. Maybe we'll take a quick break and then get back into it on Beyond the Touchline, looking at 10 African teams that will be part of this summer. Lovely stuff, Mr. L. All right, back we are with Beyond the Touchline with the one and the only Mr. Michael Lahoud giving us the lowdown on Africa for this summer. And this summer, in so many respects, Michael, represents a seismic shift, doesn't it, for the World Cup? The numbers have gone up extraordinary, 48-team World Cup. And I think the continent to make the biggest leap in terms of representation is Africa. They've gone from 5 at the last World Cup to 10. That will be part of US, Mexico, and Canada. So, Nick, do you want to kick us off with how to look forward to this summer?
Yes. So we've divided them up somewhat geographically, with the north, which includes Morocco, Egypt, Algeria, and Tunisia. And as we know, Morocco went to the semifinals in 2022, something no African nation has ever done before. As we look ahead to 2026, do you see any of those northern teams genuinely capable of going that deep or even deeper? Like what needs to go right for that to happen?
Yeah, look, when the draw came out, I think everyone, their mom, their grandma, or anyone who's older than that, still alive in the family, would have thought Morocco, and then there's everyone else, right? This Moroccan side is super talented. When you look at how they got there, 2022 wasn't a fluke for me. For me, Morocco, they've become the blueprint for what African football needs to do. The recruitment has been outstanding, but how they've invested in the infrastructure, and Adrian, you were there to witness it in the flesh. From what I've heard, and I hope to go and experience this just as a fan and hopefully to cover a match there. It's incredible. It's incredible to think that African football stadiums could be rivaling European stadiums, but it starts with the appropriation of funds that you get from FIFA, that you get from CAF, being put towards all the right things, being put towards the youth. And I mean, there's some really good players. It doesn't get any bigger than the reigning African football player of the year and Ashraf Hakimi, Champions League winner. I mean, serial winner. Some of the clubs he's played for is ridiculous. And I always forget that he's not even 30 yet. And he's played for Real Madrid, he's played for Borussia Dortmund, Inter, and now PSG, right? But they took it another step further with their recruitment and getting dual nationals, the likes of Brahim Diaz, who's at Real Madrid right now, giving him the number 10 shirt. And you saw the instant impact at the African Cup of Nations, but it goes even further than that. One of the best players that I think will be an impact for them is Neil El Ainaoui. And Adrian, I don't know if you got to see many of his matches, but he was one of the best midfielders in the competition. And he's a former Lens midfielder, obviously plying his trade at Roma. So they have this young golden generation core that have all been influenced, and a lot of them are dual nationals, whether it be from the Netherlands, Spain, or France, and they chose to play for Morocco. So it's a combination of having passion for their culture, passion for their country, passion for their families, as well as being insanely gifted footballers. And I don't have it off the top of my head. What's their group again?
It's Brazil, Haiti, and Scotland.
Oof,
Morocco.
Man. They should be able to get it done, even with that group. But man, this Morocco side, I think they can take what they did one step further. The one thing they have to sort out, and I think they now know who their number 9 is you got to figure out who your number 9 is. I mean, they have a new coach in Mohamed Ouabi, and Walid Regragui got sacked after the African Cup of Nations. So unfortunate for him. He won't be part of the team anymore. Ouabi's had success. He was the manager of the under-20 national team that won the under-20 World Cup, the country's first ever World Cup. So he'll be looking to make his own impression. And the first thing he has to get is the respect and buy-in from the experienced players who are looking to make their own impression and really build off of what they did in Qatar.
Yeah. Also on the north, Tunisia and Algeria have tough group draws. Tunisia in with Holland, Japan, and Sweden. Algeria in with Argentina and Austria. It's the A group, and Jordan. But I wonder about Egypt, Michael, because they're in with Belgium, Iran, if they are there, and New Zealand. So you can make an argument that Egypt may be second favourites to go, and it's Salah's. It's going to be Mohamed Salah's swan song. Does he go out in style with Trezeguet and El Neni supporting him?
Yeah, the one player that when he shows up for Egypt, and Mohamed Salah, he's Egypt's greatest ever player. And I know that former Egyptian legend Hossam Hassan, when it comes to the AFCON, definitely has stake and claim to that. But this will be the World Cup, and this will be the time where Mohamed Salah will break his record. So he's constantly breaking milestones. And I know personally for him and talking to journalists in Africa, that is something that he has square in his sights of doing and really owning outright and putting that to bed and putting that in the past and putting that to history. This Egyptian side, I think, will really only go as far as Mohamed Salah and Omar Marmoush allow it to
Mm.
be. Omar Marmoush, when he shows up, when he looks like the player that was at Frankfurt, when he just has that ability, as so many teams, and I watch this happen in Africa again and again, Mohamed Salah is going to attract all the attention because he's Mohamed Salah. But it's what are the other players in and around the box, in and around the final third going to do? Because they're going to have that snapshot window of an opportunity to create something. And Egypt started creating momentum at this year's AFCON or this past AFCON when Omar Marmoush decided he was going to wake up and deliver. You saw the goal that he scored against Cote d'Ivoire, and that was an insane match in itself. That's the Omar Marmoush that Egyptian fans are definitely desperate to see. So, those two are the two players to watch. I think given that there's going to be potential third place stakes in that group as well, I have Egypt getting out of the group. After that, it depends on the next draw, but this Egyptian side are good enough to get out of that group.
I think the good thing is, Michael, is both of those players should have plenty of energy because neither of them have been playing that much lately.
Yeah.
And that's always a big factor at a World Cup, isn't it?
Yeah, you've seen it. You've really seen it. I mean, I think back to, was it 2010 or win the treble? And everyone's talking about Maicon being the best fullback in world football. You get to the World Cup, Maicon looked like the three of us showing up to play in a World Cup match right now. He looked like he had a piano on it. He was running with a piano on his back, Didn't know if he was coming or going. So that's a really good point you made.
Yeah. How about the West, Michael? Your neck of the woods, your part of Africa. Senegal, Ivory Coast, and Ghana are the three. They've all had impacts at previous World Cups. They all kind of have tough draws as well.
Yeah.
Senegal are in with France and Norway, as well as Iraq. Ivory Coast with Germany, Ecuador, and Curacao. Ghana are in England's group with Croatia and Panama. Out of those three, which one do you think is equipped to go the furthest right now?
I'm going to say this. I think Senegal can win the World Cup.
Wow.
This Senegalese side is the real deal. And what made me change my mind about their ceiling was the fact that they went to Wembley and they put on a clinic against England. And it could have been worse than the scoreline was. And they played with no fear. And they have this belief about them right now that it doesn't matter who they're playing. The expectation, it's not a hope. It's now an expectation and a belief that they can beat any team, any place, anytime, anywhere. And when you've become the dominant force in African football over the last decade, it gives you that confidence. But I think it's the fact that there's this balance of experienced heads like Sadio Mane and Kalidou Koulibaly who have been there and done that at the highest levels. But now there's this younger generation and even 20-somethings. I look at the likes of Iliman Ndiaye, who's at Everton. He's having a really good season in the Premier League. This is the next step for him to deliver at the World Cup. You think of players and unsung heroes like Idrissa Gana Gueye. Well, the guy next to him, and Pop Gueye, is a phenomenal midfielder as well, one of the best midfielders in African football, having an outstanding season. You get to cover him, Adrian, with Villarreal.
Yeah.
So it's almost this passing of the baton from the wise heads of your Manes and Koulibalys to this next generation who've experienced AFCON victories, who've played in finals, who have loads of experiences, that I think it gives the collective this sense of confidence, and to have a manager in Pap Thiaw who has been part of a group that defined a generation, I think this could be the ultimate legacy. I really mean it. I think Senegal could win the entire World Cup. They're that good.
Wow.
One of the things that I found really interesting, as you mentioned it earlier, is that African diaspora that's spread out all over the world now. And the countries are actually looking for those players with heritage that comes back to their country. And you saw in France what happened between like the mid 80s and 1998. The French national team totally changed. But now a lot of those players have other options to maybe go back to Africa to play where, they didn't have that option before. What do you see as one of the things that the organization of African football has in terms of reaching out. We've seen it in the US, reaching
Yeah.
out to, Germany and other nations to get, American nationals. What do you see the future for African football in terms of reaching out to the rest of the world where they have
Yeah.
people that have that background?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that will be the ultimate equalizer and the great equalizer to bridge the gap between Africa, Europe, and South America, where the infrastructure is going to still take time, right? Right now,
Hmm.
Morocco is the one country that is bridging that gap, but countries like Nigeria, who I'm sure we'll get to, Cameroon, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, even Senegal in itself, they still have a long way to go to get there. But recruitment is everything. And one country that I think their big reason for being at the World Cup is DR Congo. I made it, and I told you this, behind the scenes, Adrian, when we were covering AFCON and even World Cup qualifiers. When I saw the groups, I pulled a coworker aside and I said, I think DR Congo are going to go to the World Cup. And everyone told me I was crazy. And look, you get fortunate when you make a prediction like that. But the reason why I said it is most previous editions, a player like Noah Siddiqui never gets anywhere near the DR Congo national team. What I think countries like DR Congo, what I think countries like Senegal, who are still doing it, and the rest of Africa will continue to do, you look at where they're recruiting players from. Noah Siddiqui came from the Belgian U19 national team and went to the Congo U19 national team and under 21s. He didn't go from the U19 straight to the full team. So there's this kind of indoctrination for some of the players who are dual nationals, because what I experienced, and I can tell you firsthand, is when you're a dual national and you come from another country, you're not seen as one of us. You're not seen as truly African. And so there's this awkwardness. There's this almost proving that you are African enough to the rest of your teammates, to the media, to your own manager, and most importantly, to the African public and your own fans. And so when the fans who are so knowledgeable, I mean, fans are showing up to under 20 matches, under 23s, under 19s, under 17s, because in Africa, those are the teams that win. Those are the teams that garner the most success. Those are the teams that have almost as much acclaim as the first team or the full teams with the national teams. So when you are a young player and you are now choosing to play for the under 20s, you're now representing your country for the under 23s, that adjustment period when you get to the full team, it just closes it that much more. And so, I think the most important thing that African countries can do and continue to do is get to recruitment early. And you're going to see more and more of that. There's so many dual nationals out there, and there's so many kids who are now chomping at the bit to say, well, I want to be a significant player for a national team at a World Cup. It's not just, well, I just want to play for England, France, Germany, whatever the country is, even Austria, Switzerland. I mean, dual nationals are all over. I mean, literally all over the world.
Yeah. That.
Go ahead. No, I just wanted to mention that one thing with one of my good friends discovered Wilf Zaha
No way.
when he was coaching at Crystal Palace. And to see his, he kind of went through the English system until a certain point where it's like, what else can I do here? And then he got recruited to go back to Africa. That must be really weird for him, I imagine, if he's brought up in South London and now he's suddenly playing over there. Like, how can you look at that as a player and kind of see how difficult that would be to insert yourself into that culture?
Yeah, it's something that I struggle with, to be fully transparent. I really struggled with that, where the 90 minutes when you leave your country that, for me, I was born in Africa, but I grew up American. I spent the majority of my life here. So for me, leaving your country, your second country, or leaving the country that is not the country of your parents, I'll put it that way, and going back to the country of your family, you feel that initial disconnect. And the one place that is your proving ground is the training pitch and the football pitch. And when you put on the jersey, you instantly know that you're literally that feeling. I'm not in Kansas anymore. You're literally not in London. You're literally not in the States anymore. You're literally not in wherever you're coming from anymore, right? You notice all the differences. One of the differences that hit me that I was like, man, I'm definitely American. I complained about the Wi-Fi. I was like, how do we not have Wi-Fi and hot water in this hotel? And my teammates, just the look of like, why did we bring this guy? Like, what? And you just compare everything to what you're leaving to come here. And the thing I realized was I was still trying to convince everyone else, but mostly I was still trying to convince everyone internally for me that I made the right decision, you know? And so the thing that you don't see is when you come back home after you've made your first trip internationally and gone back to Africa, there's scrutiny. People, how
Mm.
is it? And you feel like you're having to explain yourself to everyone. And the best thing that can happen to a player like a Wilf or some of the other players is someone like a Wilf. The most important thing he can be to a national team or a national team teammate is an ambassador and a voice for, hey, I did this, and so you can too. And so for me, that
Mhm.
person, my Wolf Zaha was Kai Kamara. So
Oh,
Kai Kamara, born in Sierra Leone, grew up in America and grew up mostly out in California and LA. And our bond was behind the scenes when no one was watching. He would be kind of my go between. He would remind me of things I forgot from my childhood of, by the way, when you go here, ask for this person and don't eat this, don't eat the fish from this market, eat this. It just made me feel like I was being looked after by someone who was invested in me. And you don't feel that when you're thousands of mile away from home, right? You do feel
yeah,
that when you're on the
right.
pitch, but there's so much that goes in behind the scenes that lead to good performances for your national team. And I think one player that I've seen do that, and I go back to DR Congo, but just the reference point from two English lads going to play in Africa. You think of Axel Tuanzebe scored the game-winning goal that sent Congo to the
Yeah,
World Cup for the first time since, was it 74, you said, when they were Zaire?
yeah.
I mean, he was so proud. And I remember seeing an interview he did, and the player that he said that he was just so grateful for that impact on him was two people. It said Chancel Mbemba, because he was more of a leader than any captain he ever had playing in England because of how he ingratiated himself. And of all people, someone who I played against, Gal Zakuani, the older brother of Steve
Mm,
Zakuani.
yeah.
He was one of the first Congolese London-born players to leave the English youth system and go play for DR Congo.
Mm,
And he kind of made it his passion and his coaching journey to go back and be the go-between and convince English-born players and convince Belgian-born players and convince French-born players that go and represent the country of your family, go and represent the country of your heritage. So I think there's just something really magical about that when you hear about that in other countries happening, because
yeah,
I experienced it.
yeah. And I'm sure it's happened with the last country I want to get your thoughts on, just to tie a bow
Mm.
on this summer. The newcomers, Cape Verde. I mean, talk about a small nation that must have used their diaspora to such great effect. But they have been a rising force in
Yeah.
African football, haven't they? Over the last decade. What do you imagine it's going to mean to the people of Cape Verde? They're watching their team at the World Cup this summer, playing Spain and Uruguay. I
Oh,
mean, they got some great games.
yeah. Look, it's so I was actually supposed to make my Sierra Leone debut against Cape Verde,
Yeah.
and my manager wouldn't let me go in time just because I was coming back from injury. So I ended up making it against Equatorial Guinea the very next
Mm,
match. But well, number one, what an amazing country, beautiful country, just incredible people as a whole. I'll tell you one place that will be the biggest party in all of America. You know it very well, Adrian,
yeah.
Boston. There
Oh
is a
yeah.
massive Cape Verdean community in Boston. I was actually recently there. My wife and I went to Boston, I think Valentine's Day weekend, and was just talking with one of our friends, Mark, who's in the restaurant industry, and he said that he has met a couple different Cape Verdeans, and that's all they talk about. They said they don't care how they do at the World Cup, and of course you're there to win it, but it just taps into the cultural piece that to see your culture represented at a World Cup, to see your country represented at a World Cup, this is a dream come true, and I can't wait to see the likes of a Jamiro Montero, to
Yeah.
see a former MLSer who has ties to the Netherlands, another dual national. I can't wait to see him lead his country out because he was a phenomenal MLS player. And now he's reaping the rewards of going back and being part of that generation. I think 2013 was really the first time they made a run in the African Cup of Nations.
Yeah.
And he was part of that group, right? A very young player in that group. So I want to see what their fans are going to wear, from the costume to the sounds to everything. And for me, the biggest thing living in New England is I can't wait to see the people. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. One final aspect about the African teams at the tournament this summer that's very different from perhaps the more recent previous editions is the presence of African coaches. 6 of the 10 nations are going to be coached by Africans, and that is very different to how it's historically been. I mean, there seem to be certain European coaches that kind of did the rounds of African countries. Hervé Renard, remember him? I think he coached like 4 or 5 different African. I'm surprised Nick Cowell didn't coach an African team at some point.
Hey, there might be still time. There might be still time.
But yeah, it's big though, isn't it, Michael? That over half the teams are going to have coaches from their own continent.
Yeah, and I think it's a microcosm of what we saw at AFCON. This past AFCON was the first time in, I think, maybe over 50 years that you saw all 4 of the semifinalists with African coaches, right?
Yeah.
And so I want to see more of this because, I think it's amazing to see an experienced manager for Algeria like Vladimir Petkovic, for a very, very talented Algerian side, for a side that even if they don't get it done, or even if they don't make a deep run in this World Cup, keep an eye on them. They will be a team that I think they will be the next team that's going to be one of the faces of African football by the next World Cup in 2030. They're very talented, very, very gifted, and very hungry. But I'd love to see an African coach. You just think of Carlos Queiroz. For me personally, Carlos Queiroz should be nowhere near the Ghanaian team. I think he's had an amazing resume, but the Ghanaian Football Association, it was a knee-jerk reaction to get rid of Otto Addo. I know the results weren't there recently, but that's someone who's done well for you. That's someone who's gotten you to a World Cup, and then you replace him with a manager that literally has a track record for jumping ship when things aren't to his liking. You think of Egypt back before 2022. He jumped ship after Egypt had gotten out of the World Cup qualifier, but he was already interviewing for a job with Iran because Egypt lost the African Cup of Nations finals. So it's decisions like that that frustrate me. And that's why I really think it was a massive deal that you had a final with 2 African managers in the African Cup of Nations, in Agragi and Pape Thiaw. And I really would love to see Pape Thiaw take Senegal the distance. I would love to see an African-born coach and someone who I think has been class personified for the Senegalese national team rewrite history. Now, whether it be this World Cup or World Cups in the future, I really think there's opportunity missed when you don't have even more African managers. But this is a stepping stone. I think things are moving in the right direction that we have this many.
There is a school of thought, Michael, that the manager of a national team should actually be of that nation. You know, we have a German in charge of England. We have an Argentinian in charge of the US.
Yeah, I mean, you have an Italian in charge of Brazil.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I can see for some of the lesser nations who are less experienced that how it can bring their national team along, having a more experienced coach. But I think at some stage there might need to be a rule brought in to say, no, it's not just the nations with the most money, but you actually have to invest in your coaching in order for the country to actually move forward at their younger ages.
Yeah, that's so true. And it goes back to the infrastructure, right? If you're investing in the infrastructure, if you're investing in the youth national teams and the youth teams, etc., all the way down to the academy teams, then those coaches get better education, they get better exposure. You think of Morocco's current coach, not in a million years in previous cycles would he be anywhere near the national team. You think of Walid Regragui. Normal times, he doesn't even manage the national team for Morocco. Morocco would not have gotten to a World Cup semifinal had it not been for Morocco hiring a manager and hiring someone within the system who his biggest gift, he'll never be known as a tactician. It's just not in his DNA right now. He can change that, but he's a motivator. The one thing he did, and Hakimi talks about this, is he was able to tap in and remind each and every one of those players that you're playing for your father, your sister, your brother, your wife, your daughter, your mother, your grandparents, your great-grandparents. They're all Moroccan. He reminded them who they really were, and that took him a distance beyond anything Spain could do with talent, Portugal do with talent, and almost France could do with talent, So there is something there, and maybe that could be one of the future keys for success for Africa.
Well, this has been fantastic, Michael, talking everything Africa with you. And honestly, we could do another podcast just on your story, but we may need a whole other hour on it. So, what do you think, Nick? Shall we finish up with a round of lightning questions?
Yeah, you want to grill the man?
Yeah,
I think we should. So we tend to do this on Beyond the Touchline, Michael. Just some questions to end up with across the spectrum, but we kind of want your most instinctive answer without thinking about it too much,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and not thinking much is, it's a different skill for different guests on the program.
We've managed to make a career out of not thinking too much, but
all right. I'll begin with the first one. Are you ready?
Yeah, hit me.
All right. Without hesitation, the best player you shared a pitch with.
Oof, Thierry Henry.
Nice. MLS, of course.
Yeah, Thierry Henry.
Some Union Red Bulls games.
Yeah, even Chivas. He got me benched at halftime, so I'll never forget him or forget that.
Yeah. All right. Best memory from our, in total, 3 years together on the Austin FC broadcast, Michael. Something the viewers never knew was happening behind the microphone, either games or studio shows.
Yeah, best memory was hearing you do your first ever goal call, Adrian, for Sebastian Driussi.
Oh, yeah.
And I will never forget it. Sebastian Driussi had just come from Zenit St. Petersburg, and a move, I don't know how that happened, but Austin fans are grateful for it. And I remember thinking, my gosh, he just scored. Good goal. And I remember Adrian looking to the side, and you could just feel the tension, looking to the side like this. And he just leans in the microphone. He goes, "From Russia, with love." And I was just like almost on the ground, just like, what? That is an all-timer. And I was just in awe. I remember Adrian covers the mic, he goes, "I think that's your moment to talk." It was just like, oh yeah, what a goal. So yeah, that'll definitely be it. Sebastian Driussi.
Nice.
Not pre-planned at all, of course.
That was on one of his
iconic
Post-it notes.
Yeah.
Rip that one off.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know if you can tell, but what mattered more to you personally? Sierra Leone qualifying campaign or MLS playoff push?
Oof.
Well, man, my MLS coaches will not like this Sierra Leone qualifying campaign. Just because it had not been done, it never been done for a World Cup, but especially when I came into the national team, there was this renewed sense of hope and this belief. And we had players playing Premier League football, Champions League football, and just this collective belief that we could go and spoil any party in Africa. And, so I'd never felt that before playing in MLS. I'd never felt that sort of fire before in my career. So definitely Sierra Leone qualifying campaign.
Okay, Mr. L, one African player heading into the 2026 World Cup who the average American fan maybe doesn't know too much about, but absolutely should and maybe will at the end of the tournament.
I'm big on Algeria, and I'll give you a name. Ibrahim Massa. This kid is going to be a star. This kid is born to be a star. He plays for Bayer Leverkusen. Yep. And if you have never heard of him, go back and look online, go back on YouTube and rewatch Bayer Leverkusen going to the Etihad. He put on a show against Manchester City, put on a worldie of a show. He is going to be at a big club. If he continues in the track record he's going on and have the World Cup and World Cups, I think he's going to have, given what we saw at the African Cup of Nations, he's good enough to play for Barcelona or Real Madrid. He is that talented. And he's someone that you have to watch.
That's a terrific tip, and he'll have a chance to go up against Messi in Argentina too in the group. So.
Yeah.
All right, and we end the episode with the same question. When you step away from the camera and the microphone, what still genuinely excites you about football?
Man, that's a great question. I would say there's nothing like football banter.
Yeah.
What you saw this weekend from City Arsenal, what we're doing here, I think just the passion, the fact that we all wake up at the crack of dawn, whether to watch Swindon, Torquay, or some club in Manchester that sometimes
Yeah.
I don't want to mention, but I will. Manchester United. But it's just the passion, right? And there's just sense of football community, football camaraderie that I will never lose, and when I do, that's when I know my time is come and gone on this earth. But I think that's something that unites us all, is that sense of camaraderie around the game. So yeah, that's definitely it.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Brilliant answer. We love it too.
Yeah.
I guess
That's
we
all
wouldn't
right.
have started a podcast if we didn't love the banter.
Yeah, no, the banter.
But listen, Michael, thank you ever so much. I don't have to tell you how much pleasure it gives me to see what you're doing now in the broadcasting world. I always knew you would do it and you would take it to the highest level. For those that don't know, you could be seen almost daily, can't you, on CBS Sports and Paramount Plus. Just tell us a little bit about what you're up to, and maybe what you'll be doing during the World Cup as well.
Yeah, so I will be, well, before I get to the World Cup, you can catch me Monday through Friday on CBS Sports Gloucester Network, Morning Footy or Scoreline.
Yeah.
And so Morning Footy is our flagship show. It's a 2-hour show every day, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then our evening show, which is a fast-paced highlight show with a ton of analysis. I like to say it's for the football junkies, right? The people who can't just get enough. You get an action-packed show in 1 hour. It's called Scoreline, and it's awesome. I love being back and forth between both shows because I don't know, I feel like you just get to tap into your football brain in different ways. Where Morning Footy, it's more conversational, more like you're back in the locker room with your teammates, and then Scoreline it feels like you're on the pitch living the game again. And then for the World Cup, TBD on what the actual plans are. As you know, Adrian, everything comes last minute.
Yeah.
But no, I'm excited to cover my first ever World Cup in real time. So I'll be across all our shows, all our platforms. And my big thing, and the thing that is my number one goal, is I want to bring some respect and awareness to African football. And obviously the teams have to do it on the pitch, but I want to change how we talk about African football. If there's one thing that I want to be remembered for after this World Cup and throughout my career, is that guy taught me something about Africa I didn't know. So that's my mission.
Brilliant stuff.
Yep,
Thank
I've
you.
definitely learned a lot, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. From Sierra Leone with love, Mr. Lahoud strikes into the top corner.
Oh man, we need to run it back.
Thank you, Mike. Take care. Enjoy this summer. It's going to be special.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Thanks, Mike.
All right.